The whisper becomes a roar for decades. Whispers traveled through private rooms, circulated in hushed tones between investors, and were debated endlessly in internet forums, conference halls, and secret meetings. The subject was always the same: two currencies that, on the surface, seemed like relics of nations weighed down by war, sanctions, and transition. The Iraqi dinar and the Vietnamese dong had become more than just money. They had become symbols of possibility. For some, they represented foolish dreams. For others, they were golden tickets waiting for their moment in the spotlight. That spotlight, after years of speculation, finally arrived. Tonight, in one of the most unexpected moments in modern financial history, the rumors became undeniable fact. What had long been mocked as fantasy was broadcast in real time, before the eyes of the world. The global financial community, accustomed to gradual shifts, carefully worded policy changes, and guarded central bank updates, was blindsided by what happened. Television anchors were caught off guard, their carefully prepared scripts tossed aside, as the news ticker lit up with words nobody expected to see that evening. The announcement was not preceded by leaks in the press, nor by the usual carefully staged press conferences. It came suddenly, almost unceremoniously, through a live broadcast meant to be routine. Yet within seconds, the weight of the message was clear. The true international value of the Iraqi dinar and Vietnamese dong had been made public. The world gasped. From rumor to reality for years, small groups of believers clung to the idea that these currencies, undervalued and underestimated, would one day be revalued. That is, officially recognized at a much higher exchange rate than the world currently allowed. Economists scoffed, calling it conspiracy theory. Journalists mocked, writing off believers as desperate dreamers. Yet behind the curtain, whispers continued. The dinar represented Iraq's oil-rich potential, a nation battered by sanctions, wars, and political instability, but always possessing immense resources beneath its soil. The dong represented Vietnam's rise in Asia, a country that had transformed itself from post-war poverty into one of the fastest-growing economies in the region. The idea that both currencies might one day be recognized at a level reflecting their true economic weight was tantalizing. But until tonight, it remained just that, an idea. Then came the broadcast. The program was expected to be nothing more than a dry, global financial update. Viewers tuned in expecting charts, market figures, and commentary on routine central bank moves. But as the ticker scrolled across the bottom of the screen, jaws dropped. First came the dinar, flashing with the words, "New international rate activated." Moments later, the dong followed, confirming what millions had waited to see for years. The studio went silent. Anchors stared, visibly overwhelmed. Then came the eruption, voices breaking, analysts struggling to articulate the enormity of what they had just witnessed. Phones began to light up across continents. Social media exploded in real time. The impossible had happened. Reactions across the globe within minutes. The news ricocheted from New York to London, from Dubai to Hanoi. Outside major banks, people began to gather. Some were ordinary families who had tucked away a few banknotes for years, mocked by friends and neighbors for clinging to worthless paper. Others were seasoned investors who had quietly accumulated stacks of currency, convinced their patience would one day be rewarded. In the United States, families called each other in disbelief. Veterans who had served in Iraq and brought home dinars as souvenirs suddenly realized they were holding small fortunes. Mothers who had purchased a handful of dong notes to save for their children cried tears of relief. Retirees who had invested portions of their savings, hoping against hope, found themselves staring at life-changing wealth. In Europe, lines began forming outside banks well before dawn. In the Middle East, cafes buzzed with conversations as people replayed the clip again and again. In Asia, families who had lived frugally suddenly faced a future that looked entirely different. The raw emotion was everywhere: tears, laughter, pacing, shouting. One man uploaded a video of his mother clutching a 25,000 dinar note, whispering through tears, "This is our miracle." A woman wrote on social media, "I prayed for this day. Tomorrow my children will eat without fear." Behind the curtain, as the world reeled, insiders quietly confirmed what many suspected: the announcement was not supposed to happen yet. Sources close to the IMF, the World Bank, and central banking circles revealed that there was a carefully guarded schedule for the release. Only a small group of top officials were supposed to know the exact timing. Protocols had been put in place to ensure the transition was smooth, orderly, and deliberate. And yet somehow, the rates appeared live on air earlier than planned. Some claimed it was an accident, a technical mishap, a premature update slipping onto the broadcast feed. Others whispered it was no accident at all, but a deliberate leak, designed to prepare the public and diffuse potential chaos. Still others speculated about whistleblowers who had grown frustrated with secrecy, determined that ordinary people deserved to know the truth before elites controlled the process. Whatever the case, the secrecy was shattered. The genie was out of the bottle. Exchanges, once spoken of only in future tense, were now set to begin the very next morning. Planning in plain sight, what stunned observers further was the revelation that preparations for this exchange had been underway for months, perhaps even years. Behind the scenes, banks had quietly established protocols. Special branches had been designated as secure redemption centers. Appointment-based systems had been built to avoid chaos. Emergency staff were on call, ready to work extended hours. This was not improvisation. It was clear that the global financial system had been waiting for the right moment to push the button. And that moment, whether intentional or forced, had arrived. Major institutions such as J.P. Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, HSBC, and Deutsche Bank were reported to have activated emergency protocols. Wealth managers received urgent instructions. Currency desks stayed open long past usual hours. Some off-duty employees were summoned in the middle of the night. This was no ordinary banking day. This was a transition of historic proportions. A historic wealth transfer. The implications were staggering. Families crushed by debt suddenly envisioned freedom. Retirees who had been scraping by now saw a path to comfort and dignity. Individuals once trapped in poverty realized they might hold the key to their own liberation. It was more than numbers on a screen. It was one of the largest wealth redistributions in modern history. Money that had once seemed trivial was now life-changing. Those who had been laughed at for holding on to stacks of worthless notes were vindicated in the most dramatic fashion imaginable. Yet amid the excitement, a subtle warning slipped through during the broadcast. The host, nearly drowned out by the shock and chatter, mentioned that contract exchange rates, higher than the official international rates, might only be available for a limited time. Those who acted quickly, making appointments and following precise instructions, could secure significantly greater returns than those who waited. This revelation turned anticipation into urgency. The coming day would not just be a beginning, it would also be a race. The dawn of a new financial era. As night gave way to morning, the sense of disbelief that had gripped the world deepened into something more powerful: conviction. The news was no longer rumor, no longer speculation whispered in corners of the internet or private meetings between hopeful investors. It was on every screen, in every paper, on every radio broadcast. It was real. The international rates for the Iraqi Dinar and the Vietnamese Dong had been revealed, and nothing would ever be the same again. From doubt to proof, skeptics, who for years dismissed the idea of a currency revaluation as folly, were suddenly left without ground to stand on. Economists who once laughed at the idea now scrambled to explain how such a transformation could have been orchestrated so meticulously. For a generation of doubters, this was more than just a financial revelation. It was a humbling. The truth stood stark. Those who had believed, those who had held onto their notes despite ridicule, were now positioned at the threshold of a wealth transfer unparalleled in modern memory. Social media bore witness to this collective shift. Posts poured in by the millions. Images of notes long stored away in drawers, safe boxes, or envelopes. Videos of families celebrating. Live streams of people rushing to banks before dawn. Where once there had been laughter at the dinar dreamers and dong believers, now there was awe, envy, and in many cases, outright apology. Banks under siege across continents, banks became epicenters of a global phenomenon. In New York, lines formed outside major branches hours before opening. Security guards stood at entrances, trying to calm restless crowds. In London, Deutsche Bank executives convened emergency meetings as their currency desks were overwhelmed. In Asia, HSBC branches stayed open through the night to prepare for the flood of customers expected at dawn. Emergency protocols swung into action. Staff who thought their shift had ended were recalled. Private wealth managers were dispatched to meet clients. Specially prepared redemption centers, previously dismissed as rumor, were suddenly very real, guiding individuals through structured exchange appointments. It was not chaos, at least not entirely. The level of preparation suggested something else. The world's largest financial institutions had long known this day would come. The infrastructure had been quietly built, not in public view, but beneath the surface, ready to activate at a moment's notice. National governments, too, were forced into rapid response. In Washington, late-night meetings spilled into the early morning hours. Officials from the Treasury and the Federal Reserve faced a new reality. Millions of Americans were suddenly holding assets of unimaginable worth. The challenge was twofold: manage the surge of wealth while preventing economic instability. In Europe, finance ministers issued carefully worded statements, acknowledging the historic realignment while urging calm. In the Middle East, Iraqi leaders spoke with pride, declaring that their nation had finally reclaimed its place on the global financial stage. "Iraq has returned," declared the Prime Minister in a televised address, his words both triumphant and solemn. In Vietnam, celebrations erupted. Officials in Hanoi framed the moment as a validation of decades of progress, a recognition that Vietnam's role in the world economy could no longer be ignored. "This is the unlocking of Vietnam's future," one senior minister declared, as fireworks lit the sky in some cities. The human side, yet beyond the polished statements of governments and the crisp reports of banks, the most powerful stories came from ordinary people. Veterans who had served in Iraq wept openly, holding dinar notes they had once thought of as nothing more than souvenirs. Families struggling under crushing debt suddenly spoke of paying off mortgages, student loans, and medical bills. Retirees who feared outliving their savings now dreamed of stability and comfort. One man in California posted a video of his children counting stacks of dong notes, their laughter filling the room. Another, in Germany, described how his grandmother, who had quietly saved a small bundle of dinar for years, now held enough to secure the future of 3 generations. Stories like these spread like wildfire, magnifying the sense of collective transformation. Opportunity and responsibility, but with opportunity came warning. Financial experts cautioned that sudden wealth carried its own risks. Banks were already designing structured payout programs, wealth management contracts, and restrictions to prevent reckless spending. The goal, officials said, was not to deny individuals their newfound fortune, but to ensure that economies could stabilize under the weight of such unprecedented redistribution. Advisors urged calm. "Do not rush. Do not panic. This is bigger than one person, bigger than one family. This is a global shift." Still, urgency remained. Special contract rates, whispered about in insider circles, were reportedly available for only a limited time. Those who acted swiftly, booking appointments and following official procedures, could secure life-changing advantages. The sense of suspense grew heavier with every passing hour. A world reset. Behind the scenes, analysts speculated about the deeper meaning of what had occurred. Was this sudden public revelation an accident, or was it part of a grand design? Some pointed to recent global summits, suggesting that the timing was deliberate, coordinated among world powers to align with broader geopolitical goals. Others believed the U.S. government had pushed for an earlier reveal to strengthen its hand in upcoming elections. A third school of thought saw it as the first phase of a larger project, a global financial reset designed to restructure wealth, trade, and power in the 21st century. Gold prices swung wildly. Oil contracts shifted overnight. Currency markets scrambled to adjust to the seismic shock. For traders, it was chaos. For ordinary people, it was liberation. The symbolism of Iraq and Vietnam, that Iraq and Vietnam stood at the center of this transformation, carried symbolic weight. Iraq, long seen only through the lens of war, sanctions, and hardship, now stood as proof that rebirth was possible. Its currency, once dismissed as worthless, had become a key player on the global stage. Vietnam, a nation once devastated by conflict, had steadily built an economy rooted in manufacturing, trade, and resilience. The dong's revaluation was not only a financial shift, but a recognition of Vietnam's rising role in global commerce. Together, these two nations became symbols of redemption, perseverance, and unexpected triumph. Personal miracles for millions, the revaluation was nothing less than a miracle. Videos of families celebrating went viral. One woman recorded herself clutching a note, whispering, This is the answer to my prayers. A father posted about finally being able to pay for his daughter's medical treatment. A young man in the Middle East described how his family's humble savings had turned into wealth beyond imagination. The stories were deeply human, touching, and profound. And while financial experts debated macroeconomics and governments juggled strategy, for ordinary people it was simpler. A dream had come true. The weight of history, as the first exchanges began, one truth became undeniable. This was no ordinary financial story. It was a turning point in history, the kind of event that would be remembered for generations. Economists would study it. Politicians would claim credit for it. But for the people whose lives were transformed, it would always be more than that. It would be the moment the world finally admitted what had long been denied. The dinar and the dong were no longer whispers of hope. They were declarations of change, echoing across every continent, every nation, every household. Tomorrow had arrived, and with it, a new chapter in the financial story of humankind had begun. Disclaimer: all content provided by IQD Global Intel is for educational and informational purposes only. We are not financial advisors and do not provide investment, trading, or banking advice. Viewers should always conduct their own research and consult with a licensed financial advisor before making any financial decisions.